Okay guys, spark plugs. Spark plugs. Can't do that plug is. But yet it's oil fouled. Big time. This is what happens when you have a bad intake manifold gasket. And you end up sucking oil right out of the valley pan. The plug fouls with oil. It's still soaked with oil after all these years. As opposed to a cylinder. Let's see what we got here. That one wasn't running so bad. Been bounced around a little bit. Gap is closed. Now here's what we're going to talk about. I don't care what plug you're on, what brand you're on, what temperature you're on. Okay, that's all preference, and it definitely depends on your engine, what you're doing with your engine. These happen to be Autolites 66s. Seem to have a lot of luck with them in my AMC engines. It's either this or NGK. I don't really run anything else. When you get these, the gasket's not on, you gotta put that on, and neither is the tip. Okay, the tip's loose, I just put it on. Okay, there are actually spark plug boots out there. That's the way it hooks onto it. Now there's also old engines on here that you put this on there with that little brass nut, but there are actually spark plug boots out there that slip onto this. So, first of all, you gotta make sure you put this on right, which is almost impossible for me with one hand. And okay, we're gonna do that. I'm gonna snug it up before I put it in. The gap. Okay. Everybody looks in the book for the gap. 32, 35, some AGIs are 60. This is what I can tell you about the gap. First of all, I base the gap on the ignition system, and I base the gap on the engine and the compression. Okay, think of it this way. Your coil, I'm just going to use a rounded off number, say it puts out 20,000 volts. There are some that put a lot more than that out. Say it puts out 20,000 volts. Now your coil puts out as much voltage as it can handle. Okay, meaning, let me word this right, meaning that if an engine's spinning at 1,000 RPM, it can constantly put out, if required, say the gap was big enough, it can constantly put out the 20,000 volts. If the engine's spinning at 7,000, it can't keep up, so it might only put out 15,000 volts. You guys understand that? That's why they came about. And the difference is between that and the regular ignition system is that's got its own generator built into it. And the faster the motor spins, the more current it makes. So the more current it makes, the more the coil puts out. It's that simple. And then if you want to see how much current it puts out, there's a couple of good videos out there. I think one place was Rocket, which I think is based out of Australia. They show you an MSD unit against the magneto, and it's like your house current against a lightning bolt. But that's another subject. So if you keep the gap tight, it doesn't require as much to get it to jump. You're going from negative to positive. This is actually positive ground. Okay, so if I keep the gap tight, it's obviously easy to jump it. So if the coil has 20,000 volts built into it, we'll forget about the amps. The amps are very light. For it to jump a small gap, okay, it's only going to require, we'll just pick a number, 6,000 volts. But it's still going to use that current, the amount of current that it has, because what you've done is, when the points were closed, you've already charged the capacitor. You can call the condenser, I call them capacitors. You've already charged it, and when you break the contact in your points, that voltage comes back through the coil at whatever that condenser puts out and multiplies it. That's why you have so much current. That's why a 12 volt system, which is really 6 volts, can put out 50,000 volts, because the condenser puts it back in through the other windings. Okay, so for argument's sake, say it's capable of 20,000 volts. Okay, the gap is tight. I use 6,000 volts. what happens to the rest of the volts? Basically what it does is it goes from current to time or duration. So the spark is less powerful, but it's longer. So now if I take this and I open up the gap really big, say we open it up to whatever the imaginary limit is, and now that coil is able to put out 20,000 volts. Now that current comes down and hangs out there until all the current is there. Then it leaps over in one big snap, if you want to word it like that, rather than it coming down and the gap is so small it just transfers over. Bzzz, okay, it comes down and it has to wait till it's all there, then it snaps over. Okay, now as spark plugs wear, this obviously wears away and the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. As the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger, this is where I don't understand why people cheat themselves. And if a plug is rated for 15,000 miles or 50,000 or 90,000, depending on if it's regular platinum or iridium, I don't understand why people try and double and triple that. Because what you're actually doing is every time it goes to jump, it actually builds up and then fires over. So you're taking every component in the ignition system and bringing it to its limit to fire. And then sooner or later the car misfires and say, oh, I need plugs. Oh, but look at that, the cap is wasted too. Haha, you know, but I got 200,000 miles on it. Yeah, you pretty much smoked everything because you brought it to the limit constantly. Okay, instead of an easy walk down the block, you're climbing a hill all the time. Okay, now a tighter gap, okay, allows a less powerful but longer spark to happen, especially if you're in a higher compression area where it's harder for it to actually do its job. Okay, so the gap is based on fuel, compression, temperature, your engine, the way you have it set up. There's a lot of variables that'll change the variation of what you want for your spark gap. And obviously where you have your spark plug pointing, they call it indexing. Okay, we can index this motor? No, but you basically index it like right here, pretty much towards the exhaust valve. Okay, and the way to do that is you just mark the spark plug, okay, say with an orientation on the top knowing it's pointing in the right direction, and you just change gaskets and shims until it lands on that spot. And that's how you index them. We're not doing any of that stuff here. I keep my spark plug gaps kind of tight. I keep them between the 32 and 35 range, more towards 32. And I seem to have a happy engine. How's that sound? And I played around a lot with the plugs on this wagon in the beginning. It's very hard to dial anything in on the wagon because the way it starts, the fact that it's only driven short distances, and the fact that it's got a tunnel ram on there, which is practically untunable above idle. So you're pretty much standing on it. You know, there's that mid-range and lower mid-range that's very, very hard to tune. People tell you they tuned it, but you know, they're stretching the truth just a little bit. I've been dealing with it for a while. You can make it better. How's that sound? But just the fact that the bottom end disappears at 2,000 just proves to you that it's not that tunable. But when you see them come in at 3,000 and you can see the horsepower difference right off the bat, and then it just rises from there, you know you're getting in the sweet spot. So we're going to put these plugs in. I'm going to get them all laying here. Well, those are the old ones. The new ones are in the boxes and the one in my hand. First we're going to tighten this up. We're going to put these in, and we're going to move on. So that was a little chat about spark plugs and staring at the side of the engine.